I've lived with Shih Tzus for more than 10 years, and whenever I look back on that journey, I can't help but laugh at all the silly misunderstandings I once had. Shih Tzus aren't like any other breed I've known. They're gentle, subtle, and sensitive in a way that sometimes makes me feel like the slow one in the relationship. They don't communicate through loud barks or dramatic gestures like huskies or Labradors. Instead, they rely on tiny cues, a soft glance, a lowered tail, a slight turn of the head, even the way they stand completely still. Over the past decade, I've learned to read these signals, and the moments that once felt like stubborn attitude ended up teaching me the most about patience, emotional awareness, and trust. I still remember my first months with my Shih Tzu. Whenever I called her, she would just stand there, watching me from a short distance. Her ears folded down as if waiting for something. Back then, inexperienced as I was, I thought she was being sassy or intentionally ignoring me. But the more I paid attention, the more I saw a different story in her eyes. Hesitation, curiosity, and a need to understand whether approaching me was truly safe. Shih Tzus read emotions better than most people realize, sometimes so well that it startles you. A slightly tense voice, a tired sigh, even a tiny change in tone can make them pause, lower their head, and look away, not out of guilt or defiance, but out of caution and respect. That's when it clicked for me she wasn't ignoring me. She was carefully navigating my emotions, trying not to upset the balance. One moment that changed everything was the first time she turned her back on me while lying on the sofa. I remember joking, really ignoring me again. But when I learned that this behavior actually means trust deep, vulnerable, trust, it hit me hard. In the animal world, turning your back means exposing your weak spot. A dog will only do that when it feels completely safe. Realizing that made me see her in a completely new light, like I had finally unlocked a small door into her inner world. And as the years passed, I saw more and more clearly that Shih Tzus don't learn from words, they learn from the emotional temperature around them. If you're stressed, they know. If you're sad, they lie by your feet. If you're upset, they keep their distance until the air softens again. I've seen my Shih Tzu freeze in the middle of the room, her little body slightly crouched just because I accidentally closed a door too loudly. Yet the moment I sat down, breathed out, and called her with a gentle tone, she rushed over as if she had been waiting for that cue all along. After a decade, here's the truth I've learned when a Shih Tzu doesn't listen. They're actually listening even more than you think. They're listening to your voice, your breathing, your posture, your mood, everything. They're trying to communicate in a language made of silence, softness, and tiny gestures. And once you learn to speak that language, the bond becomes something tender, quiet, and incredibly deep. That's why this first part of the story always begins with a simple truth. A Shih Tzu never tries to upset you. They're simply speaking in their own way, hoping you'll understand. Part 2. The truth behind constant licking, love, or anxiety. After more than 10 years living with Shih Tzus, I've learned that their tiny tongue isn't just a tool for affection, it's also an emotional thermometer. For a long time, I truly believed my dog's endless licking was simply her way of showering me with love. And yes, sometimes it is. But that is the whole story. Shih Tzus are deeply emotional creatures, far more sensitive than most people give them credit for. There were days when I would sit down on the sofa and she would immediately climb onto my lap, licking nonstop until my face was practically dripping. Back then, I found it cute. But after living with this breed long enough, I started to notice two very different types of licking, the affectionate kind and the anxious, self-soothing kind. I still remember a period when my house was unusually loud, visitors coming in and out, conversations overlapping, too much movement. During that time, my Shih Tzu began licking excessively my hands, her own paws, even the pillow she slept on. That was the moment I decided to dig deeper, and what I discovered changed the way I saw her behavior forever. Excessive licking, especially when paired with wide eyes, stiff posture, or slightly faster breathing, is often a coping mechanism. It's their version of humans biting their nails when stressed. Licking helps them reset emotionally, giving them a small sense of comfort when the world feels overwhelming. Once I understood this, I stopped pulling her away or saying enough in frustration. Instead, I softened my voice, stroked her head gently, lowered the noise in the room, or guided her to her favorite safe corner. Within minutes, the frantic licking would slow down. Her little body would relax, and her eyes would return to that calm, round softness I knew so well. What's beautiful is that once you learn to distinguish between the licking of affection and the licking of anxiety, you begin to truly understand your Shih Tzu's inner world, a quiet, delicate language only longtime owners eventually learn to hear. Part 3, Why Your Shih Tzu Destroys Things When Left Alone. After more than a decade living with Shih Tzus, I've learned a truth that many new owners misunderstand. A Shih Tzu never destroys things out of revenge. They don't have the concept of "I'm mad, so I'm going to ruin your stuff." When I used to come home to shredded pillows, torn towels, or chewed up slippers, I honestly thought my dog was punishing me for leaving her alone. But the longer I lived with this breed, the clearer it became that every ripped cushion was actually a quiet message. I was anxious, I was bored. I missed you too much. Shih Tzus form deep emotional bonds with their humans when they're left alone for too long. All that pent-up energy and loneliness has to go somewhere. Just like a child stuck in a room with nothing to do, they turn to whatever object is closest to pillow, a blanket, a shoe, a corner of the sofa, not out of malice, but as a way to cope. I remember setting up a camera once to see what my dog did while I was gone. What I saw wasn't a mischievous little monster having fun. It was a small, confused creature pacing, waiting at the door, breathing fast, and then eventually grabbing something to chew simply because her emotions had nowhere else to go. And the beautiful part is this: once I changed my approach, her behavior changed too. I started giving her more exercise before leaving the house, preparing food-stuffed toys to keep her busy, and adding a gentle, reassuring routine before I walked out the door. These tiny adjustments made a huge difference. The biggest lesson I've learned is this: a Shih Tzu who destroys things isn't misbehaving, it's a worried heart trying to survive a moment without you. Part 4. The real reason your Shih Tzu digs up the yard. I've learned that a torn-up yard is not a sign of rebellion, defiance, or some secret plot to annoy you. When a Shih Tzu digs, it isn't being naughty, it's simply following an ancient instinct, one that no amount of scolding or training can completely erase because it comes from a place deep within their evolutionary memory. I still remember the first time I walked outside and saw my garden covered in little craters. I thought I had adopted the most mischievous dog on the planet. But the more I observed, the more I realized that digging serves several natural purposes for a Shih Tzu. They dig to find a cool spot to rest on hot days. They dig to bury toys or treats, just as their ancestors once hid food for later. They dig to release stress when emotions run high. And sometimes they dig simply because they're bored and looking for something fun to do. One afternoon, I decided to quietly watch my dog in the yard. She sniffed the ground, chose one very specific spot, then dug with careful determination. When she finished, she curled up right in that little hole, letting out a satisfied sigh as if she had just treated herself to a spa session. In that moment, everything clicked to her. Digging wasn't destruction, it was comfort, instinct, and emotional regulation all wrapped into one simple action. The key is not to interpret this behavior as defiance. Scolding only increases anxiety, which ironically may lead to even more digging. Instead, I created a legal digging zone, a soft patch of soil with a few hidden toys, and gently redirected her toward it. The results were surprisingly effective. The truth is beautifully simple. A Shih Tzu who digs is not misbehaving. It's honoring the instincts passed down through thousands of years. Part 5. Why your Shih Tzu panics at loud noises. One of the things that surprised me the most during my years living with Shih Tzus is just how overwhelming the world of sound can be for them. People often forget that their hearing isn't just better than ours. It exists on an entirely different scale. A noise that barely makes me turn my head can feel, to my Shih Tzu, like the sky has cracked open. I still remember one evening during a mild thunderstorm. The thunder was distant, nothing dramatic. Something I barely noticed as I made tea. But behind me, my dog suddenly froze, ears pinned back, pupils wide, her small body trembling as if the world were ending. In that moment, it hit me just how intensely she experiences sound. Fireworks, heavy trucks passing by, construction noises, all those everyday sounds become something far scarier in her world. It isn't drama. It isn't weakness. It's simply biology. And because she cannot escape the sound, she searches instinctively for safety. Over the years, I've learned how powerful a safe zone can be. A dim corner, a soft blanket that smells like me, a favorite toy tucked beside her. These tiny things calm her far more effectively than comforting words ever could. Sometimes I play soft white noise or gentle music to mask the outside world, and almost immediately her breathing slows. Her body settles, and the panic melts away. Loud noises don't just startle Shih Tzus, they shake their entire sense of security. When you build a safe space for them, you're giving them a shield against a world that's simply too loud for their tiny, sensitive hearts. Part 6. When the world becomes too much for your Shih Tzu, one thing I learned over time is that Shih Tzus don't shut down because they're stubborn. They shut down because their senses get overwhelmed faster than we expect. Crowded parks, busy sidewalks, places full of strange smells, children running, dogs barking, loudspeakers humming. It all stacks up in their tiny nervous system like a storm no one else can see. I've taken my dog to places where she suddenly stopped moving. Eyes darting, body stiff, and no amount of calling or coaxing worked. Back then, I wondered why she wouldn't simply behave. Now I understand she wasn't ignoring me. She was drowning in stimuli. A Shih Tzu freezes when its brain can't sort through the chaos fast enough. That stillness is not defiance. It's survival mode. The most effective way to help is not to pull or push, but to train from the ground up. Start in quiet rooms. Then slowly add new sounds, new surfaces, new environments. When your dog learns in peace, she gains the confidence she needs to function when the world gets noisy. And when you witness that moment, the moment she chooses to look at you instead of panicking, you realize how powerful, gentle, patient training truly is. Shih Tzus speak in small gestures. And once you learn to read them, it feels like unlocking a secret dialogue between you and your dog. A yawn, for example, isn't always a sign of sleepiness. I used to think my dog was simply tired at the vet's office until I noticed the trembling paws and the stiff tail. That yawn was her way of saying, "I'm nervous, please help me feel safe." A slow tail wag carries a different meaning too. Not excitement, not joy, but uncertainty. It's the tail's version of, "I'm not sure about this yet." And then there's the lifted paw. Many people find it cute, but it's actually a question. It's your Shih Tzu asking for direction, reassurance, or permission. I see it often when my dog encounters something unfamiliar. She pauses, lifts a paw, looks at me, waiting for my guidance. And perhaps the sweetest behavior of all is the way they follow us from room to room. No matter where I go, kitchen, bedroom, even the bathroom, those tiny paws trail behind. It's not clinginess, it's instinct. In their minds, in the center of their little universe. The anchor that keeps everything steady. Following me is their way of staying safe, staying connected, staying whole. When you learn to read these quiet signals, the anxious yawn, The hesitant tail, the lifted paw, the loyal footsteps, you stop seeing your Shih Tzu as difficult. You start seeing a gentle soul doing its best to communicate in the only language it knows,